everybody, welcome to Master Wing. Recently we reviewed and ranked all 10 of the Swift Start birds in the base game of Wingspan. If you haven't seen it, you may want to check it out. I'll put a link in this video in the description below. But in addition to that video, the Wingspan Asia expansion has Swift Start cards as well. There are only 6 birds relative to the base game's 10, but I thought we'd still rank them on their effectiveness outside of the Quick Start guide. They're signified by red markings on the corner of the card, and they definitely do a good job of showing a new player the ropes. But aside from teaching newcomers which of these 6 birds is the best in competitive gameplay, let's hop into the ranking and see if you agree. At number 6, I have the olive-backed Sunbird. Its power lets each player roll a die and gain that food from the supply. That's a pretty friendly power, and I can see why they put the Sunbird in the Swift Start guide for new players. The brown power isn't amazing, but the Sunbird lets you gain that food in the grassland, which is usually a wanted ability. But I had to put this bird at the bottom of our list due to the sheer randomness of that brown power. When I grab food, I want that choice to be intentional. I want gaining food to help me out for my upcoming turns. And since I don't get to choose the food I receive, in that one activation, my opponent could roll exactly what they need. So that turn ends up helping my opponent more than myself. And for competitive gameplay, I can't rely on it as my food source. I can just see myself needing a rodent, and all I roll is a worm. It stays at the bottom of the Swift Start cards for me at number 6. At number 5, we have the rock Pigeon. Its brown power lets all players lay an egg while you can lay an additional egg. It's kind of like the lazuli bunting and the western meadowlark, except it's a bit cheaper and it doesn't have a nest type requirement. Honestly, I can see this being a decent bird for the first slot in your grassland, but outside of round 1, I mostly try to avoid 0-point birds, and I'm also not fond of giving my opponent a free egg in round 1. Especially if they don't have egg-laying powers and I'm really helping accelerate their board. Outside of the Swift Start guide, this bird just isn't my first choice. There's a few other birds with better abilities on this list. Okay, I really struggled between numbers 2, 3, and 4, and perhaps I could be convinced otherwise, but for now, my number 4 is the Willow Tit. For those unfamiliar, its brown power lets you cache 1 worm, seed, or berry from the bird feeder if available. That's pretty good odds you'll be able to score a point on your gain food action. I also like that it's another cavity nest to go with your pileated woodpecker and wood duck forest engine. However, I kept it at number 4 because 1, the cache isn't 100% guaranteed, and 2, it doesn't give me additional food resources, which I would prefer in round 1. And lastly, as you will see in the next minute or two, I'm saving the higher ranks for card draw or birds that let you perform an action outside of its original habitat. I have to nitpick because we're only comparing 6 birds right now. You'll see what I mean as the list goes on, but I'm still happy with the easy-to-play Willow Tit at number 4. My number 3 ranked Asian Swift Start bird is the little Egret. Its brown power allows you to draw 1 card from the deck and keep it. It also allows all other players to draw a card from the deck, but they only get to keep the card if it can live in the wetlands. So this card can help other players, but only if it meets a condition. You're kind of helping your opponent, but maybe not. If I don't have any other wetland options in the tray or my starting hand, I'd be content going with the little Egret. Sometimes in Wingspan, it's the simple brown powers like drawing an extra card that can really lay a good foundation for your wetlands. It's a reliable brown power, but if your opponent picks up one of those more powerful cards that live in multiple habitats, it could come back to bite you. That's why for me, the little Egret is middle of the road at number 3. At number 2, we have the Rhinoceros auklet. This bird just looks cool and sounds cool. It's the only predator bird in the Asian Swift Start group with a very unique ability. Roll any 2 dice, and if it's a fish, you can cache 1 fish on this card. The second half of that power lets all players, including yourself, discard 1 card to gain a fish from the supply. So in 1 turn, you could draw your cards and potentially score a point and gain a fish, which sounds pretty promising. I don't think you can rely on consistently scoring points with cached fish, but gaining a fish from the supply while drawing cards isn't bad. Oftentimes, I'm looking for ways to turn my trash cards into resources. And even though this is one of those birds that helps other players, you might not be helping them if they don't have an extra card to burn. Like I said, I really struggled ranking number 2, 3, and 4 in this list, but the fact it's 5 points for only one food gives it a boost from the little egret, and gaining food in the wetlands while you draw cards edges out the Willow Tit as well. You might even play this bird outside of round 1, which gives it even more playability than the other 2 previously mentioned. Despite only 1 egg space, I'm still sticking with the Rhinoceros auklet as the second best swift start bird for competitive play. Finally, at number 1, you've guessed it by now, the red jungle fowl. Where I'm from, we just call it a rooster. Its power lets you lay an egg on the bird as long as you have less than 6 eggs on all your birds. It kind of reminds me of the mourning dove in the base game with a 5 egg limitation. But why is this number 1 in the Asian Swift Start cards? Well, for starters, this bird doesn't help your opponent. 4 of the last 5 birds did hand out food, cards, or eggs, and for competitive play, I want to limit helping opponents as much as possible. The other great thing about the jungle fowl is that as long as you meet the requirement, you can lay an egg in any habitat. It's as simple as that. It is a fantastic swift start bird that accelerates your gameplay by allowing you to lay eggs, but in a food gaining or card drawing habitat. Round 1 is usually focused on gaining food or drawing cards, and the jungle fowl can eliminate wasted turns dipping into an empty grassland. This card would be great in a full tuck engine or even just your first or second slot in your forest. Egg laying in the forest or wetlands gives me confidence that this is hands down the best of the Asian Swift Start group for competitive play. Now to see what y'all think. Let me know in the comments if you agree with all of these rankings. Which bird do you prefer in this group? Is the red jungle fowl your number 1? I really enjoyed making this video and I'd greatly appreciate it if you hit the like button or subscribed. See you next time on Master Wing.